We're going to use the sample order lines dataset where we have 9,000 order lines. I'm going to set up a chart with cells by order lines. So that's going to give me a pretty busy chart. Let me make this be a vertical bar chart. Let me resize it a little bit. So the first way we have to show the quartiles on a chart is to use reference line. Reference line can be used with a function of type percentile, and we just have to set the percentile to 25 to get the first quartile. I can add a second reference line, and I will set that one to be a percentile 75, so I have the third quartile. And both the lines are showing on the chart. They're not really visible, so let me set the scale to be logarithmic scale, just because my data is such. And third quartile is 859.7, first quartile is 68.8. So I can already get a sense of the Inter Quartile Range right there. Let me remove that visual. The second way for us to make the IQR and quartiles visible is to select box plot visualization. So same data set, it's actually just cells in this case, and I'm going to drag order line ID in the details grammar. Now I can see the box plot, but let me make this be logarithmic scale as well, just for the distribution of the data. And now I can see my quartile values right there. I can infer the IQR, and the values on the box plot are slightly different from the values on the chart because box plot has a truncation effect that impacts it a little bit. Now, the third way would be to represent the calculation of quartiles and IQR in a table. So here's my table with 9,000 rows and 8.5 million cells. Let me build a calculation to calculate quartiles. So I'm going to use the ntile function on cells. So tile cells by 4. In this case, we're looking at quartiles. That number could be any other number. So let's save this and bring it in the table visualization. And we expect to see that it will give us 4 different lines with 4 quartiles, but it does not. It aggregates our calculation because there is no grain in our query. We need OAC to treat our quartile calculation as an attribute, and there is a function for this which we need to put in our calculation. The function is simply attribute, so I just type attribute and I need to give it a by clause so that the system knows that it needs to do that calculation at the level of order line. Otherwise it wouldn't know. There is no information in our query for this. So now we force this, and voila, we see our 4 quartiles, and each quartile has the same number of order lines, which means that we have the right calculation right there. So now we want to see the top order size per quartile. So that is what is the upper limit of quartile 1, the upper limit of 2, and so on. So let me drag cells a second time in the table here, and let me go to the numbers properties and set the aggregation for second cells to be maximum. And maximum by order line ID, because there is no information about an order line ID in the report. So now we can see that second cells is seeing 68 as the maximum of quartile 1 and 859 is the maximum of quartile 2, and these are the same values that you were seeing in the chart earlier on. So we do have our quartile limits right there. So instead of dragging cells twice, we could have created a fixed calculation here using maximum. So let me call this maximum order line value, and that's going to be max of cells by order line, and that will just replace the second cells column, which the heading may be confusing. So let me drag this. We have the same results as second cells. Let me remove that column. We don't need it anymore. Now we want to calculate the Inter Quartile Range IQR, which is the difference between upper limit of third quartile and upper limit of first quartile. So for this, let me calculate third quartile first, just to be didactic. So case when our quartile of cells equals 3, then return the maximum value of cells by order line ID. So that's the top limit of quartile 3. Let me bring this in the report. And we see that we have quartile 3, but just for the value of quartile 3. We want this across the whole column. So for this, we need to aggregate it and say, hey, whatever you have, just aggregate it at the max level, right? So I'm just adding max, and voila. Now let's do quartile 1 as well. So for this, we're just going to copy the calculation. Just type quar, and here is our column, so we don't need to retype it. Just replace 3 by 1, and let's drag this in the table. And now we have our values of third and first quartile right there. We can check it. with the max order line value there. Now let's just calculate the IQR. IQR is the difference between quartile number 3 minus quartile number 1. And I can look for quartile number 1, validate this. I'm just removing a few extra parentheses here, and validate, save that. And let's drag it in the table. And here is our RQR, 790.75, which is the difference between 859 and 68.8. So if I remove the quartile from the table, it still works. I still get the calculation right. However, if I pick a new report with IQR and just say sales, for instance, and no grain, it doesn't work. We have the same problem as the first calculation. We need the attribute function in this calculation. So I'm formatting it a bit. I'm going to attribute the whole thing at the level of order line. And that's it. Save that. And now our RQR is showing. If I wanted decimals here, I would just cast this as a number. So we have our IQR calculation. Now, what if we wanted the same but broken down by a dimension, say product category? So let us do this. Let me copy that box plot value in a different canvas, and that canvas can have a product category, for instance, or any other dimension as a category grammar. And here we can see the same calculation for furniture, office supply, technology, which are the values for my product categories. I can see all the quartiles and I can do the visual calculation. Can we do the table calculation as well, broken down at this level? So that's going to require to use one more by clause. So I have copied the table on the second canvas, and then we drag product category, and when I do this I can see that the IQR and quartiles have not changed, so we still have the values without product category, which is not what we want here. So let me remove these columns. Now let me bring the quartile calculation just to be sure, and of course these are not the right quartiles. These are the quartile for the whole data set, not broken down by category. So we need a different calculation for quartile. So let me call this quartile by category, and I'm going to use the existing quartile. I click on it, and all I need here is a by clause, and the by clause needs to be at within the entile of sales, so within the calculation of the quartile itself. And that's it. And yes, validate, save that, and let's drag it. Now this quartile by category is showing the right values. I can see it by looking at the number of order lines consistent by quartile. This is right. So now let's conclude by calculating the IQR. So this one requires two by clauses. It's a little bit more complex. So let me create a calculation here, which I will call IQR by category, and let me use the existing IQR. So let me briefly reformat this so we can read it better. It's the quartile number 3 minus quartile number 1, and here we need two by clauses. One for the max formula, so we want to by product category. We want the same on both quartiles, and the second by clause is the same as when we did the quartile calculation. By product category goes into the quartile calculation. Let me save this, drag it in the report, and we've gotten our IQR by product category. So thanks for your interest and your time watching this movie.